Look around. Everyone is always connected, always saying yes, always responding. But here's the harsh truth. The people who are always present become invisible. And yet the people who know when to step back, they don't just get noticed. They get remembered because from the dawn of time, humans have craved what is rare. Rarity signals importance, difficulty signals value, and even now, what is harder to reach commands more attention than what is endlessly available. Yes, respect comes from the weight of your presence, and presence only has weight when it isn't endless. When you give yourself without limit, your value decreases because the mind becomes numb to what is constant. Carl Jung warned that those who live without limits lose themselves in the demands of others. He says, a person who is always present and available fades into the background of everyone's life. Human attention acts like a currency in social life. And when attention flows without limits, the value of that attention drops, because brains code scarcity as worth and abundance as ordinary. Modern life rewards quick replies and constant presence, and those norms train people to expect immediacy while reducing the perceived cost of being present, which in turn lowers respect and influence. The mind registers repeated, low-cost access as normal, and normal things lose their emotional weight, which makes spontaneous interest fade and steady presence become invisible. Social value depends not only on what is offered, but also on how costly or rare that offering appears, and unlimited availability removes both cost and rarity. Psychology explains this pattern through several linked mechanisms that operate at once. The brain uses contrast to judge worth, and contrast needs difference between options to create preference. When presence becomes the default, nothing stands out, and nothing compels focused regard. Habituation reduces response to repeated stimuli, and constant responsiveness turns acts of attention into background noise that no longer triggers emotional reward. Conditioning shapes expectations, and continuous reinforcement teaches others that access requires no effort. As a result, the other person learns that interest carries no price and will invest less emotional energy in return. Social learning amplifies these effects because people observe how others respond. They copy the pattern, and a culture of immediate availability can spread quickly across groups and workplaces. Carl Jung's psychological framework casts further light on the inner cost of perpetual availability by linking over-availability to losses in inner wholeness and distinction. Jung described the persona as the social face that a person shows to the world, and he warned that excessive identification with that social mask can conceal deeper parts of the self that need recognition and integration. When a person becomes relentlessly accessible in order to please or to belong, the persona often expands to meet external demands, while the deeper self, including suppressed needs and limits, retreats into the shadow. This retreat undermines authenticity and makes relational responses shallow. The shadow grows when true limits and unpopular needs remain unexpressed, and other people sense that depth is missing, even when they cannot name the reason. The result is a subtle devaluation of the person who appears available but lacks interior distinction. Individuation, the psychological process that Jung proposed for developing a unique and integrated self, requires limits and selective presence because personal growth needs space to emerge, and constant availability deprives the psyche of that space. Social perception responds strongly to signals of boundary and selectivity, and those signals carry weight because they denote self-control and purpose. People tend to respect others who demonstrate clear limits because limits reveal priorities and a willingness to invest attention where it matters most. A pattern of immediate compliance with every request communicates weak prioritization, and observers often infer that available people lack a stable center or clear aims. Such inferences reduce esteem even if the available person performs well. Respect often derives from perceived self-governance rather than from continuous help. People respect those who choose when to act and when not to act because choice implies agency and inner resources. By that logic, scarcity of presence functions as a social signal that communicates selectivity, capacity, and a measured inner life. Friedrich Nietzsche's ideas about power and affirmation sharpen the social dynamics of scarcity by linking value to resistance and challenge rather than to passive supply. Nietzsche argued that strength and influence grow out of the capacity to say no and to set standards, and social esteem often follows from the demonstration of inner resolve rather than from accommodations. In social exchanges, a person who stands back and asserts limits creates a field in which other people must adjust and respond. And that adjustment produces attention that the always available person cannot summon because the response to unrestricted access becomes automatic. Nietzsche's emphasis on the value of struggle and challenge shows why rarity of presence can produce admiration. Scarcity creates friction. Friction invites engagement, and engagement breeds regard. Behavioral science supplies concrete mechanisms that explain why intermittent access beats continuous access in creating desire and respect. Reinforcement schedules that provide rewards unpredictably produce stronger motivation than schedules that deliver reward every time. And patterns of intermittent responsiveness create anticipation, mystery, and higher emotional investment from others. The immediate availability pattern produces continuous reinforcement that weakens motivation, while selective presence creates a partial reinforcement effect that sustains interest and increases perceived value. The neurological systems that process reward and salience respond more strongly to outcomes that follow challenge or delay, and that basic biology makes scarcity an effective lever for increasing attention and for preserving personal energy. Over-availability creates predictable costs that affect mind, body, and relationships. The always accessible person often experiences increased fatigue and reduced capacity for deep work because constant signals fragment attention and prevent recovery. The body and the mind require space to replenish focus, and persistent responsiveness interrupts that necessary restoration. Emotional costs also appear because chronic compliance breeds resentment and diminishes self-respect, and people who never refuse requests gradually lose the internal sense that personal needs matter. Social consequences accumulate as well. Colleagues and friends begin to take the person for granted, managers expect extra labor without recognition, and intimate partners undervalue presence because it arrived without constraint. Over time, these dynamics erode influence, reduce negotiation power, and hollow out the inner resources that originally produced competence. Identifying the signs of harmful overavailability gives clear guidance for assessment and change. Patterns of immediate reply, perpetual readiness to cancel plans for others, and a habit of saying yes to low-priority requests reveal a shape of availability that invites exploitation and lower standing. Social circles provide feedback through tone and behavior. Acquaintances who expect instant access rarely offer reciprocal investment, and a stable pattern of one-way giving signals that boundaries are absent. Professional indicators show up as repeated last-minute assignments, unpaid extra work, and a scarcity of invitations to strategic conversations, and these markers reveal that constant availability has positioned the person as a resource rather than as a partner or leader. Psychological cues such as chronic tiredness, irritability, and a low sense of personal agency confirm that availability has become costly to inner balance. Respect, whether received from others or felt within oneself, begins with the establishment of clear boundaries. A boundary defines where one person ends and another begins, both psychologically and socially. Without boundaries, individuality dissolves into the demands and expectations of others, and presence becomes overextended and undervalued. Boundaries do not simply mark division. They create structure, and structure is essential for respect. When people witness someone who enforces limits, they recognize not rejection but strength, because the ability to say no reveals clarity of purpose and stability of self. In contrast, constant compliance suggests instability, dependency, or fear of disapproval, all of which weaken respect in social perception. Carl Jung's psychological framework highlights the danger of living without boundaries. He emphasized that individuation, the process of becoming a whole and authentic self, requires differentiation from the surrounding environment. When a person constantly adapts to others without resistance, the persona, the outward social mask, grows at the expense of the inner self. This imbalance forces the deeper layers of personality into the shadow, where needs and desires remain unacknowledged. Over time, this neglect produces resentment, fatigue, and loss of authenticity. The absence of boundaries allows external demands to dominate the individual, and this domination erodes both self-respect and the respect others grant. Boundaries, therefore, serve as protective walls that preserve inner identity and provide space for genuine individuality to emerge. Without them, individuation halts, and the person becomes trapped in roles dictated by others. Boundaries also function as a form of communication. They send signals about self-worth and priorities without the need for constant explanation. A person who declines unnecessary requests or restricts availability communicates silently that their time, energy, and attention carry value. Others quickly learn to adjust their behavior to these unspoken rules. Social psychology confirms this dynamic. When individuals observe resistance, they attribute higher status and value to the one who resists, because resistance implies alternatives and internal resources. By contrast, endless availability communicates dependence on external validation, and this dependence diminishes status. In professional life, colleagues respect the person who says yes selectively far more than the one who says yes indiscriminately, even if the latter works harder. Respect arises not from effort alone, but from the ability to guard effort and apply it with purpose. The psychological case against unlimited presence rests on two clear facts. First, human minds value what requires effort, and second, social systems allocate respect toward those who demonstrate self-rule. When presence becomes free and automatic, both of these facts work against the person who offered that presence, and the resulting drop in esteem follows logically from those premises. Jung's insight about the need for inner differentiation and Nietzsche's emphasis on will and resistance together explain why scarcity of presence can restore value. The first explains the inner necessity for limits, and the second explains the outward social gain that those limits produce. Human relationships always carry an undercurrent of power, even when they appear friendly, professional, or intimate. Power does not always mean domination or control. Often it reflects influence, the ability to shape attention, desire, and respect. One of the most powerful forces within social dynamics is scarcity, because it alters how people distribute their focus and what they pursue. When presence is rare, desire grows, and when desire grows, respect follows. Jung explained that relationships often involve projections, where people see qualities in others that reflect their own unacknowledged desires or fears. When a person is scarce, projections intensify because the mind fills the absence with imagination. Limited presence acts like a canvas for desire, allowing others to idealize or exaggerate qualities. This process increases fascination and attachment, not because of who the person objectively is, but because scarcity magnifies their symbolic role in the minds of others. The less available they are, the more space exists for projection, and the more respect and desire attach to their image. Over-availability leaves no room for this symbolic function, flattening presence into something ordinary. Desire itself thrives on distance. Behavioral psychology shows that people value what they cannot easily reach because the difficulty signals importance. When someone is scarce, others must invest attention, time, or energy to gain access, and that investment binds them more strongly to the relationship. This is why scarcity often produces not only respect but also loyalty. The effort expended to maintain connection increases commitment. The opposite occurs with abundance. When access requires no effort, people detach more easily and replace connections without hesitation. Desire weakens because it does not require struggle, and power fades because no investment sustains it. Scarcity gains its true power, not through extremes of absence or abundance, but through balance, and this balance requires the practice of strategic presence. Strategic presence means being deliberate about when to engage, when to withdraw, and how to create rhythms of interaction that preserve both self-respect and the respect of others. It transforms availability from a reflex into a conscious choice, ensuring that presence carries weight rather than blending into the background. Respect does not arise from constant attention, nor does it arise from total withdrawal. It emerges from the careful calibration of both, where each appearance feels significant and each absence reinforces value. Carl Jung's psychology provides insight into why strategic presence is vital for the inner life. Jung emphasized that individuation depends on the integration of inner opposites, conscious and unconscious, persona and shadow, self and other. Without withdrawal, a person cannot hear the deeper parts of themselves. Without engagement, they cannot test their individuality in the world. Strategic presence allows time for both. Withdrawal creates space for reflection and inner growth, while selective engagement grounds the self in social reality. In this way, scarcity of presence is not merely a tool for commanding respect from others, but also a rhythm that supports the integration of the self. Jung's framework suggests that every deliberate absence protects the psyche from over-identification with external demands, while every deliberate presence reaffirms individuality in relation to others. Strategic presence is therefore essential for psychological wholeness. Strategic presence also demands self-knowledge, because one must understand personal limits in order to guard them. Jung's idea of individuation emphasizes that growth requires self-awareness, and this awareness enables people to determine when absence is necessary for recovery and when presence is necessary for connection. The final lesson is that scarcity works only when it is guided by authenticity. Absence without purpose becomes neglect, and presence without boundaries becomes weakness. Strategic presence harmonizes both by ensuring that each absence serves self-preservation and each presence serves meaningful engagement. Jung teaches that this balance sustains individuality, while Nietzsche shows that it sustains influence. Together, they explain why those who master the art of strategic presence gain not only respect but also freedom. Freedom from being consumed by others, freedom to direct life according to values, and freedom to be remembered for impact rather than for constant availability. Please share this video with someone who may be living inside a fog they cannot name, and your share may give them the words that set them free.